Hello and welcome to the Space Bellringer. Today is our first time talking about it, so let's talk about the definition. Space means the area in and around objects. Now, there are a couple of different ways that people use space in artwork. One of the examples that you see on the side is by Vincent van Gogh. It's called The Bedroom. Now, in this example, you can see that some things are closer to the viewer's perspective than others, and you can tell that by the way that we use perspective and space. In this image, you can see that the things that are closer are larger and the things that are farther away are smaller. And that tells us what we are closest to versus what's farthest away in this space. Compared to another type of space that artists can use, which is positive and negative space. So this was a piece by Rene Magritte, and it's doing something where it's taking the positive space, the guy that would be in front of this curtain, and moving him over. So it's kind of a surreal picture, which means like it's something that you could imagine being real, but is slightly off by a little bit, like this perfect cutout of that exact man's silhouette. Now let's go ahead and get started with our first practice today. Positive space is the space that's taken up by the objects in an image. Now, if you look at this first chair, you can see that the arrows that are leading to the chair itself all say positive. So this back is positive. This little arm on the side here, positive. This seat, positive. All of the chair is positive. But the negative space is the space around the objects. So the space that's between the back of the chair, the space between the legs of, like on the bottom here, between or on the background space around the chair. Now in this first practice, it says draw lines and label the positive and negative space in the image below. I'd like for you to first go through and practice filling in the positive space. So let's do this together. We are gonna just go through and fill in all of the positive space, so the objects in the image. So everything that is outlined here as an object, we are gonna go through and fill in with our pencil. And this coloring doesn't need to be super precise. We're just trying to show that we understand that the objects are the positive space and the area around the objects is the negative space. Now we are gonna go through and label the spaces with lines as well. So we're going to draw a couple of lines, and I'm going to say P for positive, and then I'm going to draw a line to the space around the chair and say N for negative. Now you need to have at least 4 positives and at least 4 negatives. So let's go through, and we're just going to continue labeling positives until we have 4 positives, and then we are going to label negative so that we have 4 negative spaces. Let's go ahead and do this together. One last negative. Perfect. Thank you for following along. Hello and welcome to our second practice for space. We are working on the left side, so make sure you are in the correct spot. The instructions say, the images below show different methods of creating the illusion of space. This helps you recognize what is closest and what is farthest away in a 2D image or a drawing. Now, for this first example, we have something that's in front of something else, and that's how we know that this is closest to us. The shading shows us that it is in front of that tabletop, so we know it's closer than the table edge. The placement. If something is lower on the page, it shows that it's closer to us. And if it's higher up on the page, it shows that it's farther away. Isn't that interesting? Next, we have size, and the things that are larger are closer, the things that are farther away are smaller. Next, we have value and focus. So if something is very clearly focused and has darker values, then it's closer to us. And if it's out of focus, like blurry, and if it's lighter in values, then that shows it's farther away. Next, we have 6, and that is linear perspective. So that means that it is following along these lines, all leading to one vanishing point farther away. So it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as it works its way out. The instructions say, in the images below, determine which techniques are used to create the illusion of space and draw a line to connect that technique with that part of the picture. Now let's take a look at these two images. These are both just photographs, and we are going to decide how we can tell which pairs are closest to us and which are farthest away. Now, I will give you a couple of examples, and you do need to go through and add multiple of these. So just what I do is not enough, but we are going to start by saying, all right, in this example here, we can see this pair is much larger than the other pairs. So we could say, all right, well, that is showing that the size is what is telling us that this is closest. Now you can continue and we could say, all right, well, maybe this one could be placement because we have this one lower on the page and higher up, which shows that this is closer. Now you can still do a couple more, and I would like for you to find some on your own. Thank you so much. Hello, and for our third practice for space today, we have the instructions to redraw the images and color the negative space black. Now, in our examples, the object, or the positive space, is what's black. So we are basically swapping it. And you can see an example up here at the top. So here's this ram. We've got the actual image, and then the background is filled in with black. So what we're going to do is we're going to just together draw these images. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're just doing a loose little sketcheroo here. So let's just go in and add the handles for our scissors. We've got a good handle on this. Sorry. Now, we are just gonna draw these, and it doesn't have to be very precise. Like I said, we're just going for a close representation. Now we're gonna draw our umbrella. And like I said, just close, not perfect. That's totally fine. We are going to make the handle of the umbrella thicker so that it shows up. Now let's add our cat. And we've got this like ear and the face. And like I said, it's all right if it's not perfect. All right, and then we've got the body and then the little curve on the back there. And then we've got our tail coming up. All right, now we are going to take some time to just go through, and it doesn't have to be filled in very dark, but we are just going to go around these objects and shade it in so that we are coloring the negative space, the space around the objects with black. So we're just gonna go through and do this together. And if it helps to make sure you don't color into your objects, you can give it a border so that you don't run into it, and then it'll make it a bit easier to go through and fill. And this does not need to be super precise, it's just showing that you understand that concept. Now again, I'm gonna give myself a little border all the way around. All right, and we're gonna give ourselves that border so that we can go through and fill the background very quickly with just like filling lines. So I'm just going all the way to the bottom of the square and filling that in. All right, and our last little section here, I'm gonna give myself a border around the spaces that I've drawn so that I can fill in a little faster. All right, we're filling in that background now so we can use big long lines to fill it faster. Now you may need a little bit more time. I know I did this very quickly, but that was the last of the instructions for space. Thank you so much for following along.